I never in a million years thought that I would be offering a keynote from my home office while my kids are being homeschooled, but here we are. The good news is Jessica assured me that my office color is on brand with the university colors, so I'm feeling much better about that. And I want to thank you all for giving me a reason to get out of my sweatpants, get dressed, do my hair, and speak about one of my passions, which is mentorship. One of the benefits of presenting on day 2 that both Natasha and maybe a bit Terry talked about was building on each other's ideas. So coming together like this, yesterday I was privileged to engage in a number of presentations and learn from each other, and I'm able to draw that hopefully into some of my keynote today. So that's a benefit of going on day 2. I just want to acknowledge too that normally this conference is held at the Taylor Institute, one of the most beautiful buildings on campus. So I'm going to share pictures of where the conference is normally hosted. And I hope we'll all gather next year face to face to explore Indigenous ways of knowing. So thank you to Jessica and her team for sharing those pictures of the Taylor Institute that I've used in my PowerPoint here. I'm going to attempt to provide opportunities for engagement throughout. So please, I invite you to share your thoughts in the chat as we work through the presentation. And I have Andrew and Rachel here who've agreed to be my extra eyes and ears to help with things as we move along with some of those engaging opportunities. And again, I want to thank you all for attending. I hope you leave feeling inspired to seek and provide mentorship in your various settings and personal contexts. And I'm hoping that the slides are changed. So I've developed a few learning outcomes for this presentation. Together today, we're going to reflect on our mentorship experiences, hopefully explore a variety of evidence-based mentorship models that you might be able to use across your various contexts in higher education, and hopefully identify ways these models can be introduced and strengthened in different stages and personal contexts. I'm a strong believer that mentorship is valuable no matter where you are in your career stage, so I hope that through this presentation, we're able to explore that a little bit further. And hopefully we'll recognize how mentorship can foster productive growth and development across higher education. In the spirit of celebrating mentorship, I invite you to take a moment to reflect on who your mentors and mentees have been and how they've made an impact in your work, life, career, professional development. I invite you to send a quick acknowledgement to your mentors using your social media channel of preference, and feel free to tag the conference. I don't know if everybody knows, but we actually have a conference hashtag. It's hashtag TIConf2021. Let your mentors and mentees know the difference they've made for you. I know not everybody is social media savvy or chooses not to engage for different reasons. And so if you don't want to share on social media, feel free to share in the chat or block 5 minutes in your calendar this week to send a nice email to your mentors or mentees, or even handwrite a card. Schedule a physically distant but socially connected coffee date, or just take a moment to be grateful for the people who've helped to get you where you are today. And the reason why I wanted to start with this activity is because mentorship is often overlooked and undervalued. I would not be where I am today without the guidance and support of many of my mentors and mentees, including nursing colleagues, faculty members, students, peers, and family. So I'm hoping we can start this keynote off in the spirit of appreciation for what mentorship has done for each of us. So I'll just give you a few seconds. If you want to send a message or block a minute, that's great. And while we're doing that, I'll just share a little bit about my background. I know my background's not the focus of this presentation, but I wanted to share a little bit about why mentorship has become important to me and why I choose to focus on it in my academic endeavors. So I'm a registered nurse by background. A shout out to all the nurses who've been working throughout the pandemic. It's been one heck of a year. And I've had lots of varied clinical and leadership experience, and I was really honored to be well mentored by some fantastic nurses. And I also had the opportunity to provide mentorship to new nurses. But when I started in my academic role, I had very little mentorship. I knew that I was a really great nurse, but I didn't know how to be a great teacher. And I really wanted to do that, and I wanted to improve things for others. So informally, I began to mentor new faculty and sought out mentorship for my own personal growth and development. As I began to really appreciate the value of mentorship, I decided to focus my master's degree on how mentorship supports new instructor development. And after I finished my master's, I used those findings to develop a mentorship initiative in our Faculty of Nursing. After leading that initiative for a number of years, I knew that I wasn't done going to school, so I started to do my PhD focused on mentorship, but this time more broadly, and I wanted to see what was happening across Canadian schools of nursing. We know that we have an aging faculty. We need more PhD prepared nurses to help support nursing research and help train new researchers and help support the development of nurses who are going to be needed more than ever. And I was able to use my findings into a call to action. I was really honored to be offered an Eyes High postdoctoral fellowship at the Taylor Institute that focused on professional learning and development of postdoctoral scholars. So although the population was different than nurses, a lot of those mentorship threads ran through, and it was such a fantastic learning experience for me. And throughout my career, I've also had an opportunity to do a number of collaborative research projects with some great researchers. So for a number of years, I've been working with an interdisciplinary team on mentorship of graduate students. Shout out to everyone who's out there in the audience today. And more recently, we've been focusing more on the mental health and well-being for graduate students. I've also worked with some people on mentorship and medical residency programs, and more recently, more focused on mentorship for nurses and preceptors at Alberta Health Services. So for those of you that aren't from Alberta, we have an Alberta Health Services system, which actually spans the whole province, which is quite unique. So looking at mentorship across the entire province. Also recently met up with someone named Desiree Ho, who is a medical oncologist, and she's working at developing a virtual mentorship program for her medical oncologist. So I'm supporting some of that work with her. And with Susan Kuhn from the Faculty of Medicine in Pediatrics, and she's working on professional calling and career planning workshops to facilitate more meaningful work across career trajectories. And I'm working with her with regards to mentorship on that as well, which is really exciting. So taking it even more broader than nursing. And of course, I continue to formally and informally mentor and seek mentorship from others. My research is very pragmatic, collaborative, and transdisciplinary. I've used a number of different methods, including systematic reviews and surveys, qualitative interviews, and case studies. My research participants have varied from registered nurses, undergraduate nursing students, nursing academics, graduate students, medical residents, academic leaders, and physicians. And in all the research I do, I always look to mentorship literature from across disciplines to help inform much of my work. There's great mentorship research done in education, business, aviation, lots of great mentorship work coming out of NASA. And it's important to build on that work and make sure that you're drawing from different disciplinary expertise as well. So that's something I continue to do in my mentorship research. And I've had a number of outputs and impacts from my work, including peer-reviewed articles, of course, and presentations and invited presentations like this, which I love. But I've also used my work to inform implementation of mentorship programs and working with teaching and learning leaders on campus to help integrate mentorship indicators into the performance metrics at the University of Calgary. So it's nice to see the research being put into action. And I guess throughout my various mentorship research projects and as well as my personal experience, I've learned that there's a number of benefits to mentorship that span disciplines and career stages. So what we know from the research, not just my research, but interdisciplinary research, is that those who engage in mentorship have generally higher levels of scholarly productivity. They publish more, they present more, and they have more interdisciplinary collaborations. Compared to those who don't engage in mentorship, mentors and mentees generally feel a greater degree of satisfaction in their careers. We also know that mentorship supports the development of stronger collegial relationships and social relationships in the workplace, which is great. I know that yesterday, Dr. Laura Lunsford shared some numbers on graduate student retention and attrition. And what we do know is that mentored students are more likely to persist in their studies, and mentored faculty are more likely to stay at their institution. Furthermore, those who engage in mentorship display increased confidence and competence in the various academic skills. We know that those across disciplines who actively pursue and engage in mentorship have greater levels of career success and advancement. So although this list is certainly not inclusive of all the benefits of mentorship, these are common benefits identified in the literature and across disciplines and contexts. But I want to invite you now to share. Are there other benefits of mentorship that you've seen or experienced in the literature? I'm going to ask Andrew and Rachel to collate any ideas that come up in the chat so that they can share them with us. So I'll just give you a few minutes to do that. Any other benefits that you've seen from mentorship or maybe experienced yourself? So I'm seeing community building. Yeah, friendship, great. Retention, yeah. Thank you for engaging in the chat. This is another one of my fears, that I'd ask questions and no one would answer. So I appreciate you taking the time to share. Yeah, sense of belonging, fun, connection, great. I invite you to keep sharing. That's fantastic. So as you keep sharing, I will keep moving on, but we'll be going back to the chat, and Andrew and Rachel can share any of the collated information with us as we move forward. So there's various types of mentorship models that can be found in the literature. including dyad, peer mentorship, group mentorship, distance mentorship, and constellation mentorship models. Although these are not all of them, they are the most common, but sometimes people don't even know that they exist. Sometimes you'll see different terms used to describe these mentorship models. So these are just the terms that I've embraced, but um, feel free to name them whatever you like. And there might be overlap between them. And I think the most important thing is to engage in mentorship that works for you. So it's not so much about naming the model, but it's engaging in something that's going to work. So I'm going to explore each of these models in a little bit more detail, and then we'll share some ideas on how we might be able to use them in our own context. When people think of mentorship, they most often think of a more traditional dyad mentorship model. So in this model, mentees are paired with more experienced mentors, often with institutional support. They can be formal or informal relationships. They might be pre-assigned pairings with the department or self-selected by the mentors and mentees. What we do know is that successful dyad mentoring relationships require active participation with equal responsibility shared between the mentors and mentees. These relationships can last for decades, or they might have a predefined time limit. In my graduate studies and as a postdoc, I benefited from dyad mentorship model where my supervisors and I met frequently to speak about challenges and opportunities. And this model really helped push me outside my comfort zone, but in a supported environment where I was comfortable asking questions and failing safely. On a side note, actually, Natasha was one of my postdoc supervisors, so we did and we continue to work closely on a number of different activities. The second model is peer mentoring model, and this one peers at the same level of training, rank, or experience meet to share their experiences, learn from each other, and give or gain feedback. This type of model can take many forms. Often it might be informal lunches, peer support groups, career counseling sessions, or purposeful learning opportunities that might be run by an expert. As a new nurse, a new instructor, a graduate student, postdoc, and now in my assistant professor role, I've purposely engaged in peer mentorship to support my own growth and development while supporting my peers in doing the same. So throughout whatever stage in career I've been in, I've always looked to my peers for support to bounce ideas off of them and learn from each other. Next mentorship model is a group mentorship model. So this is where one or more mentors support a group of interdependent mentees who hold themselves individually or collectively accountable to a common purpose of learning and development. Group mentoring often provides opportunities for discussion and socialization, encouragement, and support. And group mentorship can also involve several layers of mentors and mentees who vary by rank and experience. In this model, participants engage in conversation where they share their experiences, ideas, and tips. And it can also be used successfully when there's greater numbers of mentees than mentors. In my own research lab, I support a group mentorship model where undergraduate students, graduate students, my research coordinator, and co-investigators work and learn together. And it tends to work really well for us. So we all want to improve and grow, and we're able to bounce ideas off each other and support each other in that endeavor. Now, distance mentorship is where the mentee and mentor are in different locations or faculties. This form of mentorship can be particularly valuable for those located at satellite campuses or those wishing to obtain guidance from mentors who might be at a different institution or faculty. So this can be really beneficial for those who are looking for mentorship outside their faculty because there's that safety net there. It can also be good for those who might be in a position where there's not many of them on a campus. So if you're in a provost role, there's not another provost. You might be looking for mentorship from provosts from different institutions and faculties. Thanks to COVID, this model's certainly become more common. In fact, we're probably all doing some form of it now. So we're all going to have excellent distance mentoring skills by the time this pandemic is over, hopefully soon. The last mentorship model I want to talk about is constellation mentoring. And this is the term that I choose to name it, but other people might call it a network of mentoring or other different terms might be used as well. But it's really when one mentee has multiple mentors who take an active interest in action to advance the mentee's development. I like the constellation term because I like to think about the stars and building constellations and networks. It really allows mentees to experience mentors with different styles of mentoring and leadership and can provide rich and in-depth understanding of multiple facets of a career. Having multiple mentors provides mentees with greater opportunities to expand their networks. And this model can also be viewed as more of a longitudinal landscape of career mentoring. Dr. Laura Lunsford shared a great tool for assessing your mentorship network, which would help identify potential gaps in the constellation, which I found really helpful to try and figure out who you actually look to for mentors and maybe who might be helpful in filling any of those gaps. As a new assistant professor, I also actively engage in this type of mentorship. So I have a research mentor, I also have a teaching mentor, and a mentor for graduate supervision. So a shout out to all of them. I also have mentors who help provide guidance for my long-term career goals. And all of these mentors serve a different purpose for me, and I view them as being key to my academic growth and development. So now I'm going to introduce you to my colleagues who are in various roles and stages and disciplinary contexts. I want to assure you that these pictures were taken prior to COVID-19. In fact, I pulled them off Color Box, but I know that seeing people without masks can be a little bit alarming, but I assure you no one was placed at risk in gathering any of these photos. And I thought it might be nice to see some smiling faces free of masks. So although these colleagues are fictional, their stories are based on research, anecdotal experiences, and personal experiences. And we'll use each of these colleagues to explore various mentorship models that can be used across higher education. You'll be encouraged throughout to think about how it might apply to your own personal context. So here's Emanuel. Emanuel's a first-year undergraduate student in the Faculty of Science, and he's living on campus residence. This is Emanuel's first time living away from home. On top of adjusting to the university life, he's learning all those life skills like shopping and cooking and cleaning and managing laundry independently. And he's living in residence, but is struggling to get along with his roommate and finds residence really loud and more difficult to focus on his homework. He's struggling to make new connections with people and is unsure where to meet new friends. The workload is different than what he experienced in high school, and he's struggling to manage his time. However, Emanuel's loving the variety of classes he's taking and is starting to worry about choosing his preferred major. So when I think about someone like Emanuel, these are the types of mentorship models that come to mind. So although I'm only talking about 3, I imagine that they could all apply, and even more than what I've chatted about previously in the different mentorship models. But it might be beneficial for Emanuel to have a more experienced student or resident advisor as a mentor to engage in a dyad mentorship model. Or as a first-year nursing student or science student, sorry, not a nursing student, science student, Emanuel might look to establish a peer mentoring relationship to get and give support to other students in similar discipline, educational stage, or could be more focused on surviving your first year in residence. If Emanuel is interested in building his technical science skills, he might benefit from a science group mentorship model with students from across science backgrounds and varied levels of experiences. But I know that there's lots of experienced people in the room who have maybe many of you being undergraduate students, but I ask you in your current role, what might you do to support someone like Emanuel in developing meaningful mentoring relationships? In the chat, I invite you to share your ideas and your roles. And Andrew and Rachel are again going to help facilitate. And I'm really interested if there's any undergraduate students in the audience. Your experiences matter. Please share your ideas. And this is a chance that we can learn from your experiences to help support your mentorship experiences. So please feel free to share in the chat any of your ideas around how we might support an undergraduate student like Emanuel. So this is Asha. Asha is an international graduate student in the Faculty of Arts. She recently moved from Kenya to Calgary to pursue her graduate education. Now, since moving to Calgary, Asha has experienced some culture shock, which is not uncommon for international students. And more than just the drastic winters, I couldn't be more happy that spring is almost here, I hope. She's experienced some communication problems and unusual foods, different attitudes and customs, and these things have made life a little bit more challenging. As is common with many international students, Asha has periods of homesickness, and the time change makes it more difficult for Asha to communicate with her family and friends in Kenya. Asha is looking to apply for funding to support her education, but often gets lost in the complexities of applying for funding as an international student. Thanks to COVID, all these challenges are compounded and add extra stress regarding if and when she'll be able to see her family again. So when I start thinking about different mentorship models that might work for Asha, I have a few models that come to mind. So Asha might be interested in a peer mentoring relationship with other international students, especially those who have experience in applying for graduate funding. As Asha is gaining more research skills through her graduate studies, a group mentorship model might be appealing, where she can receive mentorship from other graduate students and maybe even start providing mentorship to undergraduate students or new international students. It might also be helpful for Asha to connect via a distance mentorship model with other graduate students from other institutions and countries. Asha might appreciate connections with graduate students in Kenya who share similar backgrounds. So those are some ideas of mentorship models that might work for Asha. But again, I'm going to ask you to think about, in your current role, what might you do to support someone like Asha in developing meaningful mentoring relationships? In the chat, feel free to share your roles and ideas. And again, Andrew and Rachel can help facilitate. And I'm particularly interested in hearing from any international graduate students in the audience. Feel free to share your stories in the chat so we can all learn from your experiences. Now, while you're sharing your ideas there, I might ask Andrew or Rachel to share some of the themes that came out of the mentorship model for Emanuel, a new undergraduate student.
Absolutely. So in reading everybody's amazing insights, some of the big themes that came up were for Emanuel to connect with support services, seek help from classmates, ask for help from an instructor, also things like, I'm just looking here, join clubs or different groups of like-minded peers. So yeah, it just seems like a lot of proactive steps for Emanuel to try and break out of those networks and develop new ones.
Great, thank you. Now have a quick look at the chat here. So again, clubs encourage her to speak with, so when we think about someone like Asha, so an international graduate student, I see encourage her, chat goes so fast I can hardly keep up, for networks, speak with her supervisor, another prof in her program who's approachable, great idea. Formalize a peer mentor network with international students in varying places. Yeah, that's great. Nothing like leading those types of initiatives to help build those skills. So I invite you to keep sharing your ideas of what you might be able to do to help Asha. And again, after the next one, we'll return to that. And thank you, Andrew, for keeping to monitor the chat. And now I'd like to introduce you to another colleague. So Kiera is a postdoctoral scholar in the Faculty of Kinesiology. She moved here from Ireland to pursue an Eyes High postdoctoral fellowship. As is common with many postdocs, Kiera has experienced role precarity, not a student, but not a faculty member, and hired on a short-term contract contingent on funding. She's experiencing some anxiety around launching her research and being uber productive in a short time frame. With student loans from her graduate degrees and feeling the need for more professional look and wardrobe, Kiera is being challenged to manage her expenses on a small postdoc salary. She's near the end of her 2-year postdoctoral fellowship and is eagerly searching for professional development opportunities to help secure a more permanent government research position. So there is Kiera for you. So when I think about, and this may or may not be based on some personal experiences, as I did a postdoc, as is common with some postdocs or most postdocs, Kiera might benefit from a dyad mentorship model with her faculty supervisor. This is a great way for her to get individualized support and career guidance. But as one of the most senior members in her supervisor's kinesiology research lab, Kiera might benefit from group mentorship and providing that mentorship to graduate and undergraduate students in the lab. Being a mentor to others is an important skill to develop. Kiera is also looking to establish a career in government research outside of academia. She might benefit from broad constellation mentoring relationships with those in similar positions where she hopes to land. And for any of those who were unable to attend Carrie Din and Nicole Kulos-Reed's presentation yesterday on kinesiology mentoring program, they're doing a fantastic job of this. And one of the mentors shared of the skills that she had learned as a postdoc in mentoring graduate students in her lab. So there's some great work happening on campus. So again, I invite you to share in the chat, what might you do to support Kiera in developing these meaningful mentoring relationships? Andrew and Rachel, again, will help facilitate. And I'm particularly interested in hearing if there's any postdocs in the audience. Share your stories and ideas so we can all learn from them. And Andrew, I'll ask if you could share any of the ideas that came out for Asha.
Absolutely. So here are the major trends. So obviously looking for support from the University of Calgary's International Services Office, looking towards the International Students Association, connecting with local community groups, making sure that this individual attends graduate orientation sessions to help them connect with other graduate students, help to or join an event for international students just to create some networking opportunities, connect with professional organization that might be able to help them with developing some of those networks as well, involvement in making sure that they're involved in graduate student activities, and then encouraging them to speak with their advisor or professors about their concerns and some potential approaches.
These are fantastic ideas. Thank you, guys. This is great to see everybody so engaging in the chat, and hopefully in sharing those ideas, we're spurring on some of those ideas in other participants here. So it's one way that you can help build a mentorship culture on campus, is to develop these ideas and share them more broadly. So thank you. Fantastic ideas for how we can support international graduate students on our campus. So I'm going to move on to the next colleague that I wanted to talk about, but I invite you to keep sharing your ideas about what we might be able to do to support postdocs on campus, and then I will return to Andrew afterwards so that we can talk a little bit more about that. So the next colleague I want to chat about is Haruka. So she's a new instructor in the School of Engineering, and she has nearly 10 years of engineering experience, but this is her first year teaching. Since it's her first time teaching, she's struggling with some of that role transition, as finding it hard to identify herself as an instructor. And I myself certainly went through this when I started being an instructor. She's concerned about her lack of teaching experience and desperately wants to do well for her students. After each lecture, Haruka experiences episodes of self-doubt where she questions her teaching and if her students are actually learning in her class. Haruka wants to establish a network of support, but she's younger than most of her teaching colleagues, and there are few women in her faculty. She's also a relatively new mom and would love to chat with others who have learned to balance work while being a great mother. So again, these stories are based on literature, anecdotal stories from colleagues, and personal experiences. So when I think about types of mentorship that might work for someone like Haruka, she might benefit from a one-on-one dyad mentorship with a more experienced instructor, but maybe someone from outside of her faculty. I know that the members of the University of Calgary Teaching Academy offer this type of mentorship around teaching development, so that might be one place that she could explore those mentoring relationships. She might also benefit from peer mentoring with other new instructors, both in her faculty and across campus. If there's not many that are female, or those that have been a mom, she might be able to find those outside of her own faculty, but in the institution itself. Sometimes group mentorship might be helpful, where a more experienced faculty member provides mentorship to a group of new faculty. This could even overlap and expand on both the peer and dyad mentorship models. So it's not uncommon for people to engage in various mentorship models at once, and sometimes there's some overlap. I know yesterday Craig Gibson from Ohio State spoke about a fantastic faculty mentorship program that might be perfect for someone like Haruka. So if you get a chance to connect with Craig about those ideas throughout the conference, that would be great. They have some fabulous work going on down in Ohio. So again, I'm going to ask, in your current role, what you might do to support someone like Haruka in developing meaningful mentoring relationships. And in the chat, feel free to share your role and any ideas, and Andrew and Rachel can certainly help facilitate. For those of you that are new instructors or remember what it was like during your first few years in academia, if you can share your ideas and stories, that would be great. And Andrew, while people are sharing, do you mind sharing some of the ideas that people had for postdocs?
Absolutely. So definitely there was work with different community associations that support new Canadians, connect postdocs with mentors, faculty or other postdocs at other institutions is important. The supervisor can use their network to help identify some relevant industry mentors, encourage her to participate in postdoc cohort-based teaching and learning programs to meet peer mentors, and then look for workshops and other development ideas or opportunities where you can meet peers and others who might be able to mentor and advise you on how to find a mentor.
Great. So one of the themes that I'm hearing come out from the things that you're sharing in the chat is that idea of making those connections. So engaging in opportunities where you're able to make those connections. And what we do know from lots of the mentorship research is that although formal mentorship programs can really help support people, it's those informal connections that often lead to mentoring relationships that are the most successful. So encouraging those who, on campus, no matter what context or faculty they're from, to engage in opportunities to meet other people, share ideas. Some of those opportunities you might naturally have some connections. So if you're engaging in an international student group, you're more likely to connect with international students. So thinking about which opportunities would be a good fit for you is important, and encouraging others to engage in those opportunities. I know that the university is great at offering all kinds of different networking opportunities throughout the year. Maybe COVID is, obviously put different strains on that, but the more we can do to encourage people to engage in those opportunities, the more likely mentorship is to flourish. So I'd like to share another colleague, and then we'll come back to talk a little bit more about Haruka, but this is Martijn. So Martijn is a mid-career associate professor in the Workland School of Education. He's been at the School of Education for 18 years. Although he loves his profession, he's starting to feel burned out with his committee, research, and teaching commitments. Martijn also has 3 teenage kids, recently lost his mom, and is now a primary caregiver for his dad. He's feeling a lack of career fulfillment and is unsure where he should focus himself, and overall, he's experiencing a lack of motivation. So again, these colleagues are fictional, but these stories are real, either shared through research or through personal anecdotes. And these are some challenges that are common for mid-career faculty members. And as I said at the beginning, I strongly believe that mentorship can be valuable across career trajectories. So it's not just for newbies, it could be for anybody. So when I think about mentorship models that might work for Martin or that he might want to explore, here's a few things that come to mind. So Martin might benefit from group mentorship, but this time as a mentor. There's lots of research that suggests that providing mentorship can be a great way to reinvigorate a career, explore new ideas, and create an environment where mentees and mentors can learn from each other. It also might be the perfect time for someone like Martijn to seek out a mentor who's a senior faculty member whose career he admires. It's not uncommon for mid-career faculty to experience these challenges, and a more senior faculty member who has come through this career stage might be helpful for Martijn. As a well-established academic, Martijn's made some connections across the country and internationally, and perhaps a mentor from another institution would provide Martijn with some fresh insights. Martijn might also benefit from someone like Michelle Jacobson's MOOC on graduate supervision. I was lucky enough to take that last year, and it was a great way to meet other faculty and be re-inspired in terms of mentorship. So there's things on campus that I could think of that might be helpful for Martijn, but I invite you all now to share in the chat, in your current role, what could you do to support someone like Martijn in developing meaningful mentoring relationships? And again, I especially invite those who are mid-career faculty or those who've shared similar experiences to share their ideas and stories. Now, Andrew, do we have some suggestions for someone like Haruka, a new instructor?
Absolutely. So for Haruka, and overwhelmingly, there was so much to take courses and offerings from the Taylor Institute, academic staff certificate, graduate or postdoc certificate in teaching and learning, or any of the other courses that are offered. There was a bit of seeking relationships with other new academics who are also parents, and then some people gave suggestions on maybe it's Haruka creating her own network or her own group that, and some people even put like hashtag academic moms. Other things were engaging in Twitter that might help to broaden your networks. And then yeah, I think that it was just a lot of like getting out there, networking, trying to find like-minded individuals, and looking for the supports that are already offered.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you everybody for sharing so eagerly in the chat. I appreciate that. It's a good time to give a big shout out to all the work that the Taylor Institute does to support teaching and learning practices across campus. Anybody across campus can attend workshops offered by the Taylor Institute. So no matter what your career stage, no matter what your role, I highly encourage you to have a look at what they offer and see what might be helpful for you. It's not only a great way to help build your teaching and learning capacity, but it's also a great way to meet colleagues across campus. So those interdisciplinary conversations are often the most inspiring. So I encourage everyone to take advantage of that. I love the idea of hashtag academic moms. Yes, I belong to a group that's called Academic Mamas, and it's been a great support to me as I try and balance those work and life stories, especially now given the pandemic and all the extra challenges brought on by that. So just exploring those opportunities to network and exploring those opportunities to increase your teaching capacity for someone like Haruka would be really helpful. And I see people are sharing ideas about Martijn. I'm going to introduce the last colleague, and then we'll come back to talk about Martijn and then Kwasi. So this is Kwasi. He's a new dean in the Cummings School of Medicine, and he was recently recruited from the University of Toronto. So as any leaders in the audience might relate, as is common when starting at a new institution, Kwasi's busy trying to learn a new faculty culture. And COVID has obviously had significant impacts on budgets, and Kwasi's being pushed to make difficult decisions about faculty finances. The faculty is also in the middle of making significant curricular changes in response to new institution strategic plans and budget constraints, along with a strong desire to increase enrollment, including more international students. Kwasi's also learning about a number of staffing conflicts and changes that require some mitigation. So when I think about someone like Kwasi, here's some of my ideas that come to mind. The first one is group mentorship, a group mentorship model for Kwasi, but this time Kwasi's looking for mentorship and guidance from his leadership team. They have the institutional history that he needs to make informed decisions. So Kwasi might be interested in being mentored by a group of leaders. Being a new role in a new high profile role obviously has different challenges, and Kwasi might benefit from a number of mentors in various leadership roles to help develop new dean skills. And Kwasi has his sights set on becoming a provost one day, so he might reach out to a provost about mentorship and career guidance to help keep him on track for achieving his goals. So those are some of my ideas that might work for someone like Kwasi. But again, I invite you in the chat to share what you might do to help someone like Kwasi in developing meaningful mentoring relationships. I especially invite those in leadership roles to share their ideas and stories. And I hope through using these fictional colleagues that we've begun to see that mentorship can be beneficial across career trajectories and contexts. So Andrew, was there anybody that shared any ideas about what we might be able to do to help someone like Martijn who has experienced sort of that mid-career slump?
Absolutely. So one participant put, a program we started a few years ago at UBC, Faculty of Science, is a paired teaching opportunity for faculty in their first teaching term to pair them with an experienced faculty member to collaborate on teaching the course. And they put the link. Other things were they might benefit from one-on-one coaching if they have time to engage. Martin, share experiences through international teaching, or share their expertise through an international teaching experience, cross-campus peer mentoring, and then again, just across campus with different faculties, and then develop networks based on that. So that is kind of the advice that people gave.
I love that. And thank you to whoever was able to share like a link to an actual program that's working for them. That's great. And I love that idea of sort of broadening out the networks. So for someone like Martijn, who's maybe hitting that mid-career slump, to look internationally and maybe outside of their faculty for ideas to help inspire them and support for how they could get through that career stage. Now, I'm wondering if anybody shared any ideas about Kwasi. So I know not very many people are in dean roles, so it might be more difficult to think about how you in your particular context might be able to help someone in a leadership position, but I think we can all play a role in that. So I wonder if there's anything sharing in the chat about what we might be able to do to support someone like Kwasi.
Absolutely. So maybe Kwasi could join our academic leaders program, which has senior mentors attached. I'd suggest networking with other deans, especially in professional faculties. Asked to be introduced to some faculties in the same research field and to share insights on the research. Also, personal encouragement from a peer academic would be considered a good way of moving forward. So those are just some of the things that were listed for Kwasi.
That's great. Thank you everybody for sharing. What fantastic ideas. And I love the idea that you actually have specifics. So it's not just a broad idea, it's that there's deans and academic leadership, specific academic leadership programs that people could look at. That's fantastic. Thank you very much. Continue to keep sharing your ideas if you wish. I will keep moving on in the presentation, but I look forward to after the presentation reading through all your ideas in the chat, and I encourage everyone to do the same. So I didn't want to end the presentation without sharing some top tips for successful mentoring that can be applied across these mentoring models. So 3 of my top tips that I'll explore in further details are to assess your readiness for mentorship before engaging in mentoring relationships. Think about places that you could find both mentors and mentees, and ideas on setting clear expectations. These are 3 things that I know can really help take a mentoring relationship from good to great. So in order to get ready for mentoring relationships, it's really important to take some time to reflect on why you're interested in mentorship. What is it about mentorship that interests you, and why is this a good time in your career? I keep a mentorship journal, and I encourage others to do it as well. So it's helpful to document some of your ideas and see if they change over time. I encourage you also to identify if you're interested in investing in someone's growth and development, because that's really part of what mentorship is. Consider your goals and what you hope to learn. So if you're engaging in mentorship because you have a specific goal, what do you need to learn to get there, and spending some time reflecting on that. I'd also encourage you to consider if you're willing to provide and accept critical feedback. Some of the best mentors that I've ever had have provided critical feedback in a very kind way. One of my colleagues, Dr. Jacqueline Smith, always says, say what you mean what you say, but don't say it mean, or something like that, which I think is really important. So saying what you mean, meaning what you're saying, but don't be mean about it. And that critical feedback is really important, and learning to accept that as a gift, and consider if you're willing to provide and receive that in a way that's accepted as a gift. Ask yourself if you have the time and energy to invest in a mentoring relationship. Good mentoring relationships take a lot of time and energy, but I would say that they are so well worth it. But I would encourage people to think about that, and if they have the time and energy to invest in a mentoring relationship, because those that don't invest the time and energy won't reap the benefits as much as those who do. I also encourage you to reflect on your mentorship and how it aligns with your professional development goals, and think about that prior to engaging in mentoring relationships. For those who are really interested in mentorship, it can still be difficult to find a mentor or mentee. So here are some tips on where you might start. And I think people have had some fantastic ideas throughout the chat. So engaging in those networking opportunities, looking for peers of similar experience, looking for groups that are already started, or starting your own can all help. You might want to consider colleagues whose work really inspires you. So those colleagues whose work inspire you might not always be available for mentorship, but if you can start jotting down the things that you admire about them, maybe that will help you to look for people more broadly that have those same characteristics. I encourage you to look through staff lists, departmental or professional body websites. And I think someone had mentioned that, looking at websites for those types of people. Another important tip is to express your interest in mentorship to colleagues and peers. So if people know that you're interested in mentorship and you share that with others, it's amazing how those networks start to develop. So the more you talk about it, the more mentorship seems to be present. So share your interest with those around you. I also encourage you to speak with the head of your department, your dean, your associate deans, whoever it might be, to let them know that you're interested, and then they can keep the eyes out for any connections that they think that they might be able to make for you. And I also encourage to contact potential mentors and mentees to talk about mentorship. So engaging in those opportunities to meet for coffee, or maybe on Zoom now, and just talk about what interests you in mentorship, maybe what you admire about that person, and why you might approach them to develop a mentoring relationship. And it also helps you establish a mentoring fit, which we know is important. So having those relational skill sets that match is important. So those are my ideas around how you might be able to find a mentor or mentee. And the last tip that I have is around setting clear expectations. So one of the number one reasons we know mentoring relationships fail are due to unclear expectations. So here are some things that I know are important to address when beginning any mentoring relationship. First of all, think of how often you'll meet, and think about if you have the time and the bandwidth to be able to do that. Is it going to be a weekly relationship, a bi-weekly relationship, twice a year? Spending some time to think about how often you're going to connect is important, and making those expectations clear. Also speak about what you need from each other to make this relationship successful. Is it that you need someone to review some of your documents? Maybe you're applying for grants and you could really benefit from some research mentorship around looking at those things. What do you need to make that successful? What are the specific things that you're looking for guidance for? Identify how you'll communicate, including the frequency, modes, and response times. So I know lots of my younger students now are very tech savvy. Well, I guess lots of the world is now, but we communicate via text often, or email, or now on Zoom frequently. Other times prior to COVID, we would meet maybe monthly and go for a walk and a chat about how things were going. And so we thought about how we would communicate and what that would look like. Thinking about roles and responsibilities. So for my more formal mentoring relationship, sometimes we'll develop an agenda, and it might be the mentee that develops it, or the mentor. Or if you have a peer group, it might be that you rotate who's developing an agenda. And if you need to take meeting minutes, maybe you share that responsibility as well. For less formal relationships, maybe that's not as important, but determining what those roles and responsibilities look like early on can be really helpful. Confidentiality is a really big one and is often overlooked in those initial conversations around mentorship. But I think good mentoring relationships exist in a safe environment. So knowing that you can ask those questions and know that they're not going to be shared broadly, and that you can talk about things in a way that's in a supportive relationship it's not going to be spread outside of those relationships is really important. Another thing that gets overlooked is those strategies for managing conflict. So thinking about conflict happens and it's bound to happen in mentoring relationships as they do with most interpersonal relationships. But if you can come up with some strategies prior to how you will manage that, it helps set the stage. So with all of my graduate students that I mentor, some of our first meetings are around that conflict. So if at some point we are in conflict, what are our strategies? We're going to call it out and we're going to talk about it. And if at any point we feel like that relationship's no longer working, we're going to have open and honest conversations around that and think about strategically what our next steps might be. So maybe it is that I help you find a mentor that's a better fit for you, or maybe it's that you need to take a bit of a break, and when you come back we will re-engage in these mentoring opportunities again. But thinking about those strategies early on is helpful. And the last thing is setting clear and achievable goals. So figuring out what you want out of that relationship, setting those goals, and that really helps you to see if those relationships are successful.